Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to have with me two people that we co-opted without lying to come and talk to us and resolve the problem of education in the world. I found the two brightest people in the world, and they're going to answer all of the questions correctly. And finally, we can put this to bed. They are Father Al Holtz. He works in Benedictine Prep. He's one of the founding Benedictine monks of a very successful urban school in Newark. And Darren Burrs, that works in a charter school, very successful one, in Boston. The name is Boston Collegiate. Our intention today is to have a conversation around what are the aspects that make the conversation of identity. When we think about education, when we think about the question of education, all of us have very high expectations. We not only want our children to be well educated, we want to also resolve the problems of our society. Think about the impact or the intention of Brown versus Board of Education. We want it to be of high quality. We want to actually help the students to become themselves better persons. We want almost everything, and we expect everything from it. Yet when we start talking about it, we have a hard time trying to wrap our head around. The intention of today is to look at how two educators who have been in the field for many years respond to some of those questions. And I actually asked them to do this in the form of a dialogue, so in the form of asking each other questions. Just to make it a little bit more lively, we will not allow you to ask any questions. You can do so to them afterwards. We will begin, I want to begin just very briefly asking both of them to give us a sense of where they work around one very simple question. The question is this: when we think about identity in schooling, at the school level we think about the mission of the school. We try to understand what is it that we are trying to do. And every school, successful schools nowadays, are very purposeful with regards to what they are trying to do. They think about what, to use a word, what the culture of the school is. And that culture has the origin of a group of educators that get together and think about it and work together. It's not that we were born learned, we experiment with your children. That's what teachers do. We experiment with your children. So, Father Holtz, if you can tell us a little bit about where you work and what makes the place special in your eyes.
Okay. I've only been given a certain number of minutes, so don't worry. I can't go on as long as I'd like. St. Benedict's Prep was founded in 1868 on the outskirts of Newark, which is now in the middle of downtown. And in 1972, because of all the social unrest and the Newark riots in '67 and so on, our white prep school that was then 100 years old closed. But there were a bunch of young Benedictine monks in the monastery at the time that said, well, we have a vow of stability, we're not going anywhere, what can we do? So we were dumb enough to reopen the school. But this time for a majority Black and Latino kids. And none of us knew what we were doing. We had no money, but we had buildings and a faculty. So what I'd like to do is share with you what we have been doing for the past 42 years. Specifically 8 different facets, and I've only chosen 8. Here are some programs that are the hidden curriculum. Yes, we teach all the subjects. We're a college prep school. We get kids into Bates and Brown and UPenn and Yale. But for me, what I want to share with you is, here are some things we do. 550 boys, all boys. I guess it's 2/3 African American, another large group of Hispanics. most of them from the city of Newark and East Orange and Irvington, socioeconomically all the same. Our school is family style. Each student belongs to one of 18 homeroom groups. But the groups are, the reason I say family style, each group is made up of kids from 7th through 12th grade. So you've got big brothers built in to the situation. All sorts of cross-age tutoring and even cross-age counseling. A kid can identify with a group, and each group is named after a famous person in the history of St. Benedict's Prep, going back almost 100 years. Every day we get together as a school, everybody. We take attendance and so on, so it's one big homeroom. Again, the kid gets a sense of belonging to a much larger entity where we do scripture, we sing, then we take attendance, we make announcements. But the fascinating part is that it's all run by the students. That's the next big thing for us. The crucial principle of our school is never do anything for a student that he can do for himself. And the amount of money that we spend on people in schools doing stuff that a 17-year-old could easily do is a shame, right? Like taking attendance. The kids know who were there better than the... So for 42 years, the kids have been taking the official attendance. So our students take leadership roles in things like running that morning convocation. The other day, 550 kids sitting in there, and one of the seniors was fed up because too many kids were talking while somebody was making an announcement. And he stood up and dressed them down and told them to shut up. And everybody, yeah, you're right. That's the way the school runs. The adults, you don't need the adults there for that part. Membership is not handed to you. Again, we're a monastery school. So when you walk in, you get a gray hoodie with a little hood, and that's yours for the year, for 1 year. If you come through with the 3 A's of academics, activities, and attitude, then you can get your black hoodie, which looks remarkably like a Benedictine habit with its capuche. But you may not get it. You've got to earn it. It's something that you do earn. On our ship, there were no passengers. Kids, I paid my tuition, blah, blah. Nobody pays what it costs. But on our ship, when you get on board, we hand you an oar. So your crew, no passengers. And that's something that's, I think, very important for a kid to identify himself with. A new freshman comes in and spends a week in school, sleeping on the gym floor at night in a program run by sophomores and juniors, again, because kids run the school. And he learns all about the school, lots of it. And he also learns that he can do things they didn't think he could do as far as overcoming difficulties and pressures. It also breaks down the problem of the fear that's bred by ignorance. We have black kids, white kids, we got Buddhists, and all sorts of people, all mixed together, and that's an important part of who we are. The freshman year ends with a 53-mile backpacking hike on the Appalachian Trail from High Point down to the Delaware Water Gap. These are kids from the city. They have to hike 53 miles with a backpack. There's an honor code. There's no locks on lockers. Again, because we expect you. We know that you're capable of being honest, and we expect you to be honest. We have a huge counseling department, much bigger than, I don't know, any high school that comes even close, because we realize that some kids are dealing with so much stuff at home that we cannot expect them to do geometry unless we give them a lot of help. So we have groups that meet however often as they need to. Alateen, kids with no fathers, anger management, a couple of others like that. Just part of school life. In conclusion, I'd say this is the hidden curriculum of our school. I could show you the course of studies, and it looks like any other school. But the hidden curriculum that helps the kids to discover their human face is what I thought would be a fascinating thing to give to this discussion. And we've been doing it for 41 years now, and it works.
Father Holtz, you call it hidden curriculum because you expect the kids to learn something out of all of those activities. What are they learning out of those activities?
Well, I think that's why it fits so nicely with our topic today. They learn I am lovable and capable. If you learn that by the end of your life, right? I'm capable. So when somebody says to me, I want you to run this group, I want you to stand up and run this meeting of 550 kids. So, me? Yeah, you can do that. I'm sure you can do that. I'm capable of carrying a 30-pound backpack, 53 miles, in this place that's filled with bears and snakes and man-eating God knows what. Because the seniors tell the freshmen, you going on the trail, man? Oh, man, you got to be careful. There's monsters in the swamps that come out of the swamps. And then, I ain't going. What are they learning about themselves, you see? You better be asking that question if you're teaching kids. So if you're teaching a kid and he scores very high on the standardized tests and stuff, but you make him feel like a piece of crap in the process, as a Christian, that's not satisfactory for me. Frankly, when he dies, the Lord's not going to ask him, what were your scores? He's going to say, who did you love, right? And how did you love? The hidden curriculum, then, is just simply all those things that make a student feel the way he feels. Watching the interaction of the faculty, that's hidden curriculum. We don't encourage experimentation around here. We don't encourage people being a little bit out of the ordinary. We don't encourage people to be, well, that's hidden curriculum. So we try to be real careful about that, and sometimes very explicit about that. When we want silence in that room of 550, the hand goes up, and the kids theoretically get quiet. And if they don't get quiet fast enough, we got to come back after school and practice. We never punish, never punish. We might practice until 5:30 in the evening, but we don't punish. We just practice.
Darren Burris is is the best math teachers that I know. And math is the subject that has the fame to be the most hated subject. And I wanted to hear from you, Darren, how do you see this hidden curriculum interacting in math?
Sometimes in mathematics, there's sort of a cultural baggage when you're teaching math that whether students like it or not, they at times feel worse about themselves if they can't do it, or they make excuses for not being able to do it. So it's a little bit, when you're a math teacher, there's this little extra kind of need to deeply reach all students, because that student who doesn't learn math actually feels worse about themselves. And so when you're thinking about reaching all learners in the hidden curriculum, it needs to be about what do they know and where can they go, about growth, as opposed to meeting one particular mark this day, but creating opportunities for them to meet it over time. It's about teaching them that they can solve problems, even if that one particular math concept is elusive, but you're teaching them to be a problem solver. You're teaching them to be a collaborative thinker. You know, you want to put tasks in front of them that require them to rely on others. Sometimes math instruction is also very individualized, as opposed to teaching them about what it means to work with others to solve a problem. I think also there's a little bit of a sense that kids tie their own success to that long term as well. So it's also about painting math as something that's for them, no matter what they are, whether it's as simple as getting them to buy into investments or understanding the world or understanding the events around them, but making it engaging enough and relevant enough for them that they find it something that's meaningful, and you've kind of moved behind the content to just make them understand the world better. But that's hard. It's all hard to do.
And it is interesting because in encouraging the person to actually grow in their understanding of self, mm-hmm. in their identity, the first place where the students reach is what perception the adult has of me. So I wanted to hear from you also a little bit, what have you seen, because you also, as part of your job, you coach teachers, when you see how do we adults communicate these expectations, not only verbally,
yeah.
but also in the way in which we do certain things?
I would say there are probably I mean, in terms of things that are negative, in terms of a student's identity, lots of times teachers, the first thing you want to warn them, you want to warn yourself when you stand up in front of them or interact with students or with a new teacher, is people are given to comparing, talking about which students are better, or, you know, I'm sure all of us have been in classes or been in experiences where it's clear that some are being held up and some are being held low. It's very hard because the act of praising sometimes, or at least as I was raised in the classrooms I was in, always meant a comparison. I was never praised for what I did. I was either praised for that I did it better than someone else, or I was not praised and seen as not meeting that expectation. So a lot of times in math instruction these days, it's about personalizing, deeply knowing the student and having them set goals, and you set goals for wherever they are in their math continuum, so that that student is thinking about what it is that they need to do to get better, not because they want to be better than someone else or because they're not meeting someone else's expectation, but they're meeting the expectations that, you know, that you have fostered between yourself and them about where they need to go. But that's very hard, I mean, as a teacher, to look around the room and see 24 different people with 24 different skill sets, life histories, and trajectories, and then try to make them find success on their journey. But comparisons they're damning.
When Father Hollis, when you were saying that never do for a student that he can do it for itself, as adults, we tend to have very, I wouldn't say low expectations, but we are afraid of that students get hurt. They are we think of our children as very, sheltering in a sense, or they're going to get hurt very quickly.
As idiots.
So when the mother is afraid that her idiot children made mistakes, how is that affecting their search of self, their development as human beings?
Did you ever read that book called A Nation of Wimps? It's a marvelous book, A Nation of Wimps, and it's about the helicopter parents. When the helicopter parents at their worst, there's a place for helicoptering your kids, right? I had no idea he was doing that. But hovering over the kids, well, these poor mothers that have to drop their kid off at the front door and say, you're not going to hear from him. This is Sunday night. You won't hear from him until you pick him up on Friday. And the tears well up in the mother. I just said this to a kid on Friday. I said, tell your mom I said hello. I talked to her for half an hour after you went through that door over there for your freshman orientation experience. But he's never been away from me. And then 53 miles hiking in the woods with the bears and the jackals and the man-eating boa constrictors. It's not the kids who don't have the confidence, right? It's us. So, well, the kids can never do that. We do it all the time, just expecting the kids to be competent. Load the buses with all the freshmen that are going up onto the Appalachian Trail. You don't think the adults are going to do that. You got a 17-year-old kid. In other countries, other cultures, right, that kid would be raising a family. 12-year-olds walking around with guns in patrols in the jungle and stuff like that. And our kids, you know. So I think I'm answering your question. Think of something that a 35-year-old man can do that a 17-year-old kid cannot do. You know, and we say, oh, you can't do that. That's too complicated. Of course, thank God for things like VCRs. Where's the 6-year-old? Here, program the VCR for me. That we learned the hard way that these kids are so competent. You know, we had not from my school, we belonged to a consortium of about 25 schools from around the country, and we trade kids, or not even trade, but send kids. So one kid was sent from one school to a school down in Houston. He did some volunteer work in the hospital. This was in 1975. And that was where DeBakey was doing his heart research and stuff. And this kid, he says, why are you not computerizing this data? Everything was on these cards, you know. And this, 1974, 75. And he said, this should be on computers. This kid actually started this whole thing in this big hospital with DeBakey doing, yeah, he's a 16-year-old kid. He's a computer whiz, and he said, why aren't you doing this? And he showed them how to do it. That's a true story. I was like, well, these children, the children, and Dr. DeBakey didn't know how to do it, but I don't know. You got to trust that they can.
What makes you, I mean, you're in downtown inner city Newark, which is a very depressed city, and you are telling us that your children, your kids, your students are running the school and you're fine with it, which in a sense it sounds like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you gotta really go and see it to believe it, because just the idea that suddenly everybody is good, it doesn't sound very. But the question that I'm most interested is what is it that sustains your belief that actually allowing your kids to risk is not a bad thing?
It's belief in guardian angels more than anything else. I think that a lot of this, go ahead, give it a shot and see if it works. But seriously, just even as a humanist, you would say, I have trust in the basic intelligence of these kids and their basic goodness and their basic capableness. And the more you raise the expectations, the better that kids are. So we expect that when the hand goes up, you're going to shut your mouth. And we expect that, and we'll keep practicing until the demands are met, because we know you can do it. So expectations is a big part. Our expectations dictate what happens. So if we have cops in every hallway, that's telling what the expectations are, right? Mm. And we're fortunate because as a private school, we don't have to deal quite so much with that sort of thing, because kids know that we don't have to keep them. And but yeah, what sustains us in our belief? Well, because we've been doing it for 41 years and it works. And you win a few, you lose a few, and a few get rained out, but you suit up for every game. And you just keep going. And of course you're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are very valuable. The cognitive research these days is showing that you learn far more by being wrong than you do from getting all the problems right. So you make mistakes and your brain is rewiring itself. So that's what we allow the kids to do, is to make mistakes. That comes from our background as Benedictines too. That St. Benedict in his rule for monks says, yeah, mistakes are mistakes. But if you hide your mistake and won't admit it, that's when the problems come. That's when you get punished. You don't get punished for mistakes. But if you don't admit your mistake, that's a problem. Because you learn from your mistakes. Now, he knew that in the year 500, and now the cognitive researchers are finding that out, that you learn more from your mistakes.
Could I answer that one too, that question? I think I'm not as good a humanist, and I might have a little less faith. But for me, it was only that students actually made me believe. I think that I had high expectations because I was idealistic, that I entered public education to do something and thought that I could do something. But I don't know, I'd like to think that I deeply believe that students can meet really high expectations, that any kid could do anything. Mm-hmm. But I think that for me, it was being in a place where people were working hard, and then kids actually showed me that they could. And so now it's those stories of kids each year kind of defying their local circumstances, family condition, or even their sense of self or whatever it was. I would say that that's what sustains me. I think it would have been hard if it hadn't worked, if no kid had not graduated and gone on to the next thing and been successful. But it's encouraging, so that when I when I get the chance to talk to people, I can say, have high expectations. If you're an educator, stick with it. Students can do it. But I think I needed a little proof.
And Darren, do you ever lie to your kids too? That's always good. There's no reason why you can't do this homework.
Yeah.
And you know what? He comes back the next day and he said, I got my older sister to help me with it, and here it is, I did it. Good. It's a little lie here and there.
Yeah.
See, if you're a priest, you get away with that.
What is the value of mistakes? Because I mean, if math, as you're saying, the mistakes are ever present. As a matter of fact, there is no growth without a previous mistake. But in math in particular, we are always defined by the mistakes.
Yeah.
So as a math teacher, what value do you give to the mistake?
I got a D- in freshman algebra, so you take it.
I would say for me it was, well, at first I thought the mistake, when I was teaching in Philadelphia, in a large urban high school, mistakes were a reflection upon myself as a teacher. So when students were out there and they were making mistakes, again, it's that young idealistic self that I thought that was a statement about me. I didn't have any idea that it could have been a process of their learning. I just thought that I had failed them. And so I think for a lot of teachers that I work with now, it's about having a plan, knowing that everybody's going to make mistakes. No matter how great that day was with that student may not understand that concept, and finding ways to incorporate that. But once you start doing that, you begin to realize that learning then is this sort of like this negotiation between mistake and growth, a step backward and a step forward. It's not always linear. Sometimes you're going to need two people to think about something together. You're going to have to give them wait time. You're going to have to give them time to negotiate. Meaning, it becomes a lot trickier, a lot lumpier. But once you start bringing the mistakes in, then you actually have at your disposal the exact moment that you want to show them that they've learned. When you start moving the mistakes out and they're the bad things, then kids they never seem like they've learned enough, that they've never done a good job. And so you start bringing it back to them and saying, we looked at this mistake. You actually capture that moment where you say to them, you've learned, like you've come to something that you didn't know before. But I didn't do that for a long time.
So we send our children to your school. It's a school in which everybody can do whatever they want.
Oh, yeah.
And mistakes are welcome. So like what type of place allows for this freedom? So like what type of structure allows for freedom?
Family. One time we were going to throw a kid out, and because he was really bad, and so we couldn't do that without his student group leader. He's a member of this group of 25 kids, brought in his the senior who was in charge of that group, who supposedly knew the kid, had been dealing with them all year. And Father Edwin says to this senior in high school, he says, so we're going to throw him out. What do you have to say? And he goes, Father Ed, did you ever make a mistake? And then the kid says, you know, it says in the Holy Rule that you're allowed 3. Kid stayed. We didn't throw the kid out. Did you ever make a mistake? Did your spouse ever make a mistake? Did one of your 5-year-old ever make a mistake? What's your attitude towards that? Teach a kid to play chess. I was in a rather dysfunctional household once as a guest, and the father is playing chess with his 7, 8-year-old. That's a stupid move. Why the hell would you do that? That's dumb. Instead of saying, oh, look what you did now. Show me what the problem is with that move. You see, you're looking at the rook, and then the kid goes, there it is. That's what Thomas Aquinas calls the illuminatio vultus, right? Boing! Oh, wow! Learn from his mistake instead of being berated for it. So, of course, the more mistakes, the merrier. Mistake is a mistake when you make it twice. First one's a learning experience. Next time around, wait a minute. No, you didn't learn, did you? Okay, now you're in trouble. But, yeah, I don't want you to, I'm sure you understand. It's not like, oh, yeah, do whatever you want. But kids aren't afraid then to try stuff, right? In math. Give this a shot. Oh, no, I might get it wrong.
So education is about learning to fail?
No, learning by.
Maybe learning by or learning from.
Scientists. What do scientists do, right? What do you do when you're, as a human being? An old monk was asked once, what do you do in the monastery all the time? Well, we fall down and we get up. And we fall down and we get up again. We fall down and we get up. That's life. So you're going to tell the kid, you're not allowed to fall down. What we do in the school too, though, is in our culture, as soon as you walk in the door, there's a carved wooden thing that says, whatever hurts my brother hurts me. So when there's somebody failing in the class, part of that is on you and you and you. And whatever helps my brother helps me. So the competition part for us is pretty much confined to our excellent sports program. You want to compete, go compete against another school. Our coach has a thing in the soccer thing, he says, our family versus their team. But we work together. So just the other day, I had a kid who didn't get it at all, the thing we were teaching. So I took the brightest kid in the class and I said, you have 10 minutes to teach this kid all this stuff and it's going to affect your grade. I didn't have to say the second part. I didn't really have to at all. And guess what, right? That always, if you were, some of you teachers, when the kid would say to this other, well, why didn't Father Albert say that? You know? I mean, it's simple, but my way of teaching it, my approach, and so on.
I think, well, I mean, when I think about, I don't know how to follow up with that, but when I think about freedom in schools, lots of times freedom is this individual kind of right that you have. And when schools think about themselves as places that teach individuals and only them, then you worry about them doing something right. If they're not doing something right, then there's consequences and things like that. But it sounds like we're younger, the school that I'm at right now. We don't have quite as much experience. I think we're trying to become a place like that. But it's a little bit more about saying, how can we be free together, so that there's mutual accountability, that I just can't be whatever I want to be. I need to be mindful of those around me, that I'm part of an institution, that we have some shared values or things that we're negotiating together. And I think really good schools are places that when you walk into them, they don't feel like a collection of individuals who are obeying particular rules and you're disciplining each kid because they each have an infraction, but you're finding ways that they want to be better versions of themselves because of what you've done together, which sounds like what's going on there. We're trying to get there, but so I think that unfettered freedom might be, I guess, to me, dangerous. Communities do things with freedom, and they can do things that are great. They can also do things that aren't so great. But a school that can bottle, we have these kids coming every day. We've got 100 of them in this building. What can we do together is the idea, as opposed to, does this kid know geometry proof X? That's just the wrong mentality.
So we just told everybody here that if you bring your kids, they are going to make a lot of mistakes. They are going to be exposed to reality. I'm going to use this word, reality. They're going to go there and they're going to learn from it by hitting sometimes the head on the wall, etc. And we come to realize that maybe these kids can do a lot more, and that we are, in a sense, robbing them from the possibility of actually growing just by protecting them. I'm wondering now, what is the role of the adults there in the school? So what are we doing there then, no?
Okay. For me, it might sound maybe a little conservative, but I think of the adults as the holders of tradition, in the sense that I myself, as a math teacher, I hold the tradition of mathematics, and it's sort of my role to pass that on and to these students so that they might do with it what they will. And I actually have to take that responsibility seriously, because these students will leave me, they will go into the world. If they want to go into college, or they want to go into career or into the military, or whatever it is they're going, there are certain things that I need to pass on to them, however that happens. So I feel a very strong sense that as the adult, I hold the tradition. And then the other side of that is that as the adult, then unfortunately I have to act like one. I have to be the one that's willing to always be honest, to always look at myself to make sure that I'm not being biased or whatever, that I can uphold the best expectations in others, that I'm willing to learn from them. I have to embody all of those things that I might actually not be that good at. But being in this place as the adult for these kids actually makes me have to be a better version of myself. Like I have to be the best possible Darren I can be when I'm there.
Don't you hate that?
It's terrible. It causes me to sweat. So I have to keep tradition, but I also have to be the best version of myself.
Maybe it's easier to say what we should not be. The dispensers of knowledge. Everybody comes in with a little port in the side of their head and we just dump the knowledge in, That's not what our approach, I think, I would hope now in the 21st century. Modeling, when you make a mistake, even like losing your temper with the kids, and then you apologize publicly to the kid. Oh, and that's a sign of weakness. No, it's not. Apologizing is a sign of strength. See, modeling. Control is an interesting. Well, if the adults weren't there to control this thing, it would degenerate into chaos. Last year, a group of German educators, Catholic educators, were visiting our school during the morning convocation, and it went rather long. And then the headmaster gets up and says, we are not going to readjust the schedule as we sometimes, maybe too often do, where we'll push the whole thing back 10 minutes or something. We're not going to take time off first period or whatever it was. He said, yeah, we're not going to readjust the schedule. And then right after that, the senior group leader gets up, this kid, and he says, we will readjust the schedule by 10 minutes. And everybody goes, okay. They knew who to listen to. You don't need the adult to run the schedule. And the reason this kid did it was because there was a senior U.S. history exam going on, and he knew that they couldn't afford to shorten it up or whatever it was. And very simply, can you imagine the German educators when they heard this 17-year-old get up and contradict the director? And the kids didn't even do it. Yeah, all right, so we know which schedule to follow. We need the adults to maintain order. That's overblown. If something's getting shaky in our school, like let's say stuff in the cafeteria, the cafeteria is a mess or something like that, the last person in the world to handle that is going to be a grown-up. You bring in the senior group leader and say, what the heck's going on in that cafeteria? It looks like a pigsty. You got 2 days, no, you got 1 day to fix that. If you don't fix it, then I'm going to, as the adult, I'm going to have to step in. You think they can't fix that? Sure they can. So they don't need us to control it as much as we would like to think, So modeling is one. I love that thing about reminding them that they're part of a tradition. We stand on the shoulders of Pythagoras and Descartes and Pascal and all that. That's important stuff. We aged, toothless ones are supposed to be doing that, But, the kid's lovable and capable. He can control himself. And if he gets out of line, you whack him a couple of times, Is this being taped because a lot of this stuff I'm talking about is against the law? Like you're a parent and your kid's not in school, and you get a phone call from a 16-year-old. Hi, I'm Larry's group leader. What's the story with Larry? Why isn't he in school? That's illegal. You can't do that. You can't give that information to some other kid and tell him to call the parents. But so far, we haven't been in jail yet.
If education is about learning these, I'm going to call them behaviors, or better than behavior, this openness to what is in front of me, this wanting to dare and be courageous in front of it and engage with it. Why do I have to learn content? So like every kid that is taking a math class in this country, except for the A student, asks, why do I have to learn math? And usually educators, I was a math teacher at some point, we tend to give the answer of, because you're going to need it in the future. But it's very insufficient. So like, why is the content important? And I want to ask this question to you, Darren, because we've done some common work in the Common Core, and there is an intention there that is intriguing to me in trying to understand why content is important for ultimately the desire of this development of the person, this search of identity that we are talking about.
It's a big question.
Do you want me to make it smaller?
No, I'll deal with it.
You want me to reduce the expectations, Darren?
No, I'll rise to the expectations.
Don't worry that if you make a mistake,
it's a safe
we're in
place
safe
for
ground.
me up here. I think, well, I guess it's part of my job to make math wonderful, to make it compelling and interesting, even to the most resistant. So I don't want to leave aside the fact that this content matters, not just because of what it could do in some future job or some future thing, but for it actually to be interesting, whether it be patterns or things exponentially growing, whatever it is, there are ways to make it seem curious, to get questions to come, like why is it that way? So I don't want to leave the content. I think it's compelling. But I do think with the new standards, there is a push to thinking about that math also has all of these other habits around them. Mm-hmm. So things like perseverance. That actually part of being a great mathematician is persevering. So when you have a problem, you try one thing, then you might try another, you might try another. And so with the content on one side, that's something that I would want all of my students to leave my classroom with, right? This ability to persevere. Another one is to see structure. So one of the great things in math is that you begin to see things differently, you begin to see patterns, you begin to put things together that you wouldn't normally, you may not normally do. I'd want to bequeath that to them, that when they look at the world, that whether it's numbers or not, they're beginning to look at it carefully, to think about it. One of them actually is to construct arguments and have valid reasoning. So whatever the content is in my math class, I want my students to be standing tall, constructing arguments, justifying their claims, constructing them in a way that wherever they are, they're confident, able students, and whether they're in math class or they've decided not to do anything with math and they're in law school, that's something I think a math class can give them.
Excuse me, Darren.
Yeah.
I don't. Is that going to help my kids standardize test scores?
I did say the content part at the beginning. I do get to that too.
Well, how do you test for this stuff about, and I'm only semi-joking.
Yeah.
How do you test for the fact that the kid's becoming a more effective thinker or that he can put an argument together, like in geometry, right? Boom, boom, boom.
Well, I guess do we have to assess that?
Whole lot of legislators out there saying if you're teaching it in the classroom, it better be something that you can test for because your salary's going to depend on it too if your kids do poorly. And I'm not joking on that one, right?
No, I think, and that's one of the things, the topic of our discussion is about where do we want the future of U.S. education to go? Or what does that mean for identity? And I think right now, when a teacher walks into a room and they're thinking about themselves and their career and these kids as do they know whatever is going to be covered on the April exam, that's for me, that's still an important part of what education does, is give kids knowledge or create experiences where they gain knowledge. But because that's become, in the last 15 years, the sole focus, I would hope that in the next 15, that we realize that a kid doesn't persevere and finish their college degree because they learned X and they got this score, but that they learned something about themselves, they learned how to deal with failure, they learned to organize themselves, manage their time, they learned to believe in themselves. All of those things make for an effective education system. So I wouldn't disagree with you.
Which is interesting because at the end of the day, even as we are talking as educators, we are describing education as, and I heard you say something like this, a very high-risk business. But we want to also be accountable to ourselves and to our kids. So therefore, we want also to measure it. In other words, if we want to actually communicate to our kids that they're making a mistake, we have to actually show them that they made it. And we are in between these worlds in which ultimately we want these kids to flourish and be something that we do not imagine to be. Yet at the same time, we get this sense of how are we getting there? To what extent are we, so like, what would look like, so like when we think about what our classroom, when you two think about what your classroom looks like, how you treat your students, how does that reflect to the culture of your faculty? So like you were saying, I want to be a model of a learner, no? To what extent what we are asking the students to do in the classroom and in the hallways are the expectations we have with the adults around us?
Yeah.
Or are we having different expectations there?
I would say that early on, I thought that I knew, I had sufficient knowledge, skills even, to do the job well. And that it was my job for the students to get on board with my plan for them. But as you know, when we started 3 or 4 years ago working together as schools in Boston, when you start teaching, you realize that you're not sufficient yourself if you're really trying to do right by the students you have each year. So I think that any teacher begins to model the kind of learning that you want in your kids, that you know that where you are now is not where you need to be, that you will need help, you will need people observing you, you'll need people looking at your lessons, you'll need people helping you all along the way. And that's one of the reasons why my little school down the street came to your building, and I started working with your math teachers. I watched their classrooms, they watched mine, we started thinking together, because I wasn't sufficient myself. I had to be equally learning about what I was doing, and I think a culture of learning like that, if it's happening amongst the staff, it's much different when you get to the kids, because you start to see them as learners, you're all learners. It sounds a little kumbaya-ish, but it is pretty wonderful. I mean,
Kumbaya is a great song.
yeah.
Final question. Father Holtz, we are talking about that we develop here. If basically the adults allow me the space to grow and to, in a sense, to make decisions, to be free, and in being free, deciding a structure that allows me to risk, to make mistakes, to be corrected.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not, or is that enough, or do I need to belong somewhere? So ultimately, do I really need a group of people around me? Do I need to belong to somebody in order to find this identity that I'm talking about?
Well, the kids apparently think so, because the gang movement in Newark, I mean, we're in the Bloods neighborhood, frankly, but one of the things that can get you thrown out of St. Benedict's is membership in a gang, because we only have one gang at St. Benedict's, and that's us. That's our gang. You can't belong to somebody else. That's what it's all about. We need to belong. Kids will go out and commit murder so they can belong to a gang. That's what we're built for, right? Even God is family. God is love. 3 persons interacting, interrelating. It's part of our nature. So to build an environment in which the kids are competing against each other and don't care about one another, that's not teaching them how to be a human being, it seems to me. And could I interject something?
Yeah.
In our physics lab, Father Mark put up this sign. If you can measure it, it's not that important.
What was the question? Something about
How important it is to belong somewhere. I mean, successful schools these days, like your schools, tend to have a very strong identity as a school. In other words, if I were to walk around Newark, I know that I will recognize your kids. But if I work in collegiate, if I'm in Dorchester neighborhood, I know how to distinguish the collegiate from the Cristo Rey, from the Burke kids. There is a very strong sense of identity that comes out of the fact of belonging to a place that nevertheless has the desire for you to be free.
Yeah. I would say we have a lot less of, we're not there yet with, I think kids feel like they're belonging to a place totally. I mean, I think some do. I think we really have done right by a collection of them. I would say that the parents and families, though, are there for the same reasons. We have a very strong college prep mission that every single student, we're going to prepare them for college. And I think all of the kids do believe that. But I also think that we're trying to figure out if we are supposed to be all things for all those kids. Some of those kids come from very strong families, very tight-knit communities, and they're actually coming to us just for a safe place to learn. And, but I think that there is, without a doubt, the kids that are most successful there are the ones that feel belonging there, that find strength there. They don't find limits, but they find strength. That they find that wherever they're going to go next, it's better for them to have been there. But I think we're still trying to figure out, we know that we can't be everything and all things to them, and that we shouldn't be. But how do we strike that balance? How do we meet each kid's needs? How do we be what we should be for that individual kid? Is something we're still trying to work out.
Final question to you two, and this is for you to answer it shortly, even though it's unfair for me to ask it that way. Another way of asking you the question of what is the heart of the schools where you work is whether it can be replicated. So what is the piece that I would need to grab from what you have in order to have what you have?
What a great question.
I know,
wow.
huh? I prepared.
Wow. Let me email you an answer in about 2 days. Isn't it great? Everybody's holding their breath. We don't have a program like you can buy the St. Benedict's program, but all those different elements, people can pick and choose. You can have kids run your school. I mean, and to that level, it'll take some time to do that. So different elements. But I suppose one of the real big ones, anyway, for me, is whatever hurts my brother hurts me. To get the kids to believe that. We hook them together on the Appalachian Trail. The first day they walk in, they belong to what we call a color group. My group is purple, and there are 7 of us. And one's a black guy, well, a couple of black kids, a Hispanic kid, a funky white boy, as we call him, kid from Mongolia. You know. Whatever hurts my brother hurts me, and whatever hurts me hurts my brother. Whatever helps my brother helps me. If you can get them to believe that, see, then they're going to be good fathers who aren't going to walk out on their spouses. They're going to be good citizens. Who knows what else they can be.
I think it's hard for structures. I mean, even though structures seem the easiest thing to transition, like I'm thinking about bringing back this idea of having 7th through 12th grade advisories maybe, and pull that structure from your context, see what it would be like in my school. But I think for us, it's more about the disposition of continuous improvement. It's very easy to go in every day and to try to not be better than the next day. And I think the school will change. In 10 years, it will be different. 5 years ago, it was a very different place. So the only thing that I would say that I would want someone to take off the shelf if they were going to replicate the school is to say, how are you always going to ensure that you're not settled, you haven't settled for good enough? And I think one way that we do that is that we kind of have a flat structure where any changes in the school that are led from teachers are led from the rank and file from teachers. And so there's committees for teacher retention, there's committees for college readiness, there's committees on race and diversity, and that when the school decides to take a new direction, it's not anybody else but the teachers making that decision. So there's continuous improvement, and it's improvement based on we've owned that this is where we want to go. That's what you should take.
Well said.
Thank you very much, the two of you. It's two very particular schools. One's literally run by teachers, another one run by students. Not everything is as pretty as is described, but what it is very true on both of them is that there are two schools where the communities are very much eager to help people learn and not to protect them. Eager to be open and to allow the kids to explore, to make mistakes, to get up and stand, to keep moving. And adults that actually believe that we are, the only difference between us and the kids is that we are more mature because we've learned more, therefore we've grown more. Thank you very much, Father Holtz and Darren. If you wanna, before you applaud, Father Holtz brought a couple of books, one that he wrote and one that describes what the urban school culture is in his school that he will be, I told him to sell them, not to give them for free, because these schools don't run themselves. You can actually buy them and have him sign it or talk to him at the back at the Human Adventure Books. Thank you very much.
Thank you.